I'm Joanne Banko, author and online educator at Let's Go Sew. Today I want to share some pretty piping tips with you. Piping is one of those accents that you can add to virtually anything. Garments, home decor, crafts, comes in a wide variety of sizes. We're going to focus today on what I call dressmaker size piping. And I want to show you some of the techniques that I use to create this book cover and eyeglass case and pillowcase. So you can see they both have decorative piping added to it. And when we shop for piping, sometimes we find decorative piping already, by the yard or in a package. But if you buy plain piping, you can add decorative accents yourself. So that's what we're gonna focus on. Let's talk for just a minute about preparing fabrics if you do want to make your own covered cording. First of all, you're gonna need cord, and cord does come in different sizes. This is pretty much the standard size that you find in the dressmaker piping, but you can also find it just a little bit finer. And in fact, you can use all kinds of different things. You want something that's got a little bit of firmness to it, but this rat tail cord, which is used for a whole variety of things, also makes a good piping filler cord. So if you have a lot extra and you want to use it up, you can use it as your piping filler cord. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to cut our strips, and we're going to cut them on the bias. That is essential for making piping because you want that fabric to mold over that rounded cording, and if you're cut on the straight grain, it's not going to shape over that. So you can see I've got a perfect 45-degree angle. We find that on a lot of our quilters rulers, and so that makes it really easy to cut your strips. If you're doing long lengths of piping, you're going to want to join those pieces, so you would simply lay the two together and do a diagonal seam, and when you open that up, you'd have a longer piece, trim that, press that seam, and you're good to go. So today, I'm going to show you both. I'm going to show you working with the strips that I've cut and working with the ready-made piping. Now, would you believe that you can actually make piping on a serger too? Let's roll over to the serger real quick. I'm going to show you how that's done. My piping foot has a groove, so I'm able to take my piping cord, sandwich it around that bias, and get that underneath the foot right in where there is a channel. Okay, I may not get that first end good, but eventually it'll straighten itself out. Let me get that slid in there. Sandwich that in. And you just want to make sure that stays right in the groove. Nice and smooth. This is really, really, really quick. It's just a really fast way to make piping, long lengths of it. So again, I'm probably not going to have the beginning part of that look really perfect, but let's look at this part here. You could see where my seam ends there, and then my piping is there. If I were to stitch that, that would all be hidden. The serger stitches would all be hidden in the seam. All right, let's move over to the sewing machine and see what kind of magic we can make over here. Grab my piece here, and you could see again, if we were going to make the piping on the sewing machine, we would essentially need a similar type of foot. We need a foot with a groove or a channel. So I've got a couple different feet here that have a groove. I have a clear foot here, and then I also have a metal foot here. This one's a little unusual. It's got two slots, so you can make double cording there. And then I've also got the standard, ordinary sliding zipper foot. So take your pick of these, whatever one is available. I love to use this clear foot. So I'm gonna take off the standard foot, and I'm gonna snap on this clear foot. And especially when I want to do the decorative, this is the only foot that I can make use of to do the decorative style. I can use this foot to sew the piping. I'll show you that real quick. Again, just like I did on the serger, I'm just getting that lined up. I always cut things longer so that I have extra length at the beginning and extra length at the end so that I can cut off the parts that aren't so perfect. I'm going to move my needle so it's just to the right of that cord. Okay, So again, I just moved my needle position by shifting that a little bit. And in the first time we run that through, we don't need that to be really close. On the serger, it ends up really close just because that's the way it is. But on this one, we don't need it to be right on the edge. We just need it to be close to that. And then we will be able to use that piece to insert into our garment, craft, whatever that is. So there you go, cording nice and sandwiched in there. All right, now let's get to the decorative part, because this is where it really gets fun. All right, I am going to just simply take my ready-made piping. I'm going to slip it underneath the foot. And I'm going to, again, make sure that piping cord is right in that channel. I'm going to go over here and I'm going to select a decorative stitch. And I like to use this feather stitch. I want to make sure that the width is narrow enough to cover that. I usually like to lengthen it a little bit. And we'll just do a couple inches here of this so that you can see how I did that one. This is just, it's just so much fun. So try some different samples, experiment with different decorative stitches and see what you like. What you ideally want to do is have it look as pretty on both sides so that that stitch is literally wrapping around. So I'm using a metallic thread. You could use standard sewing thread. You could use a contrast. You just want something that's going to be a little decorative. All right, we're going to do another thing here. We're going to go into a menu where I can actually create my own custom stitch. So I'm going to touch that little key there, and I've got a little cheat sheet here telling me what the settings need to be, because I'm actually using numbers that are coordinates. So I'm going to set that, and then I'm going to move down to the next number, which is 20. So let's see, I got one to go there. I'm going to set that, and then I'm going to move this over to the right, and I'm going to set that. I'm going to go ahead and test, and let's see what that looks like. What I'm doing here is I'm creating a long blanket stitch. Now you might have a blanket stitch built into your machine, so you can go ahead and try that, but I like this extra length because it gives a little bit more space where the piping is showing, where the color is showing, and shows that contrast. So that's the exact same method I used on the pillowcase. I just tied in the color scheme and used the red thread on the white piping. So you get the idea there, same thing. All right, let's go ahead and take this out. And I think you're gonna agree that is a really pretty decorative effect. So whether you're using a decorative stitch or a nice long blanket stitch like that. All right, when it comes time now to sew that in, we're just literally going to sandwich that between the two right sides. Now I want you to notice that I've got just a 1/4 inch seam allowance here. I'm going to go back, let's go back home and just pick a straight stitch again. I've got a 1/4 inch seam allowance here, and I've actually got a ruler on the table that allows you to put your piping right in it, and there are several of those available where you can use a wider piece that wraps around your piping and then put it in that ruler. It has a slot, and you can cut that with your rotary cutter and it'll trim it down so it's just like the ones that you buy in the package. All right, now normally, again, I would switch to regular sewing thread and use a color that's going to match with my fabric. Let's get that tail of thread there. It's always hard to grab that, okay? Because I want you to see how easy it is now to sandwich that in. So again, my cording is riding in the groove. I want to move my needle over, so I'm going to do a right shift here until that gets close to the piping. And you could do a sample of this and test it out just a little bit, maybe use a basting stitch at first to make sure that you've got the needle in the right position. And I'm getting a little off track here, but I think you're going to get the picture here. Because what we want to do is we want to sandwich that in between so that the piping is completely caught in the seam allowance, and that is just peeking right out. If this was something I was using that was lining, that would be folded back. Look at how pretty that is. That really creates a gorgeous, gorgeous accent effect. So again, let's just recap. You've got the ability to use a piping foot on your serger. You've got the ability to select from a variety of piping feet on your sewing machine. And you could think about how you would sew this into other areas. Let's talk about corners for one. So if I've got to do a corner, I can't pivot that. So what you would do, take your scissors, okay, and you would make little snips right into that seam allowance, okay? And we would go around that, and we would actually round that corner. So you get the idea there? When we were sewing that, I would then base that on first, and then when I sandwich my two pieces together, that's all going to be anchored. So that's an important area. Okay, and then just one other thing, if we were joining it, it's very easy to just overlap that. Make sure you remove that excess cord. So let's go back over to the table and let me give you a closer look at the book cover, it's a journal cover, and the eyeglass case. So you can see both of these have the piping inserted along the edge, decorative stitching done on it. You could do the same thing, you know, like I showed over there, and then just add that. I bought ready-made piping and finished it that way. Inserted it into the top edge of this eyeglass case, and both of those make a great set. You can see again on the pillowcase. So be sure to visit the website. We've got free instructions for you, including bonus instructions for how to make your own book cover, pillowcase, and the eyeglass case as well.